Hey, this is Doyle Bramhall II, and you're watching Sit and Spin with Joe.
Hi there, and welcome back to another episode of Sit and Spin with me, your host, Joe Royland. Today on the show, a special little extra length episode for you. And first off, many thanks to the man who led us into it and who's going to be the subject of this very show himself. And that would be Doyle Bramhall II. We're going to be talking about his new album, Rich Man. And we'll get to the album review itself in a second because I got a ton of notes to go through before we get that. But first off, some history on Doyle Bramhall II, if you aren't familiar with him. He is a singer, songwriter, guitarist, and producer. He's the son of noted drummer Doyle Bramhall, who played with Lightning Hopkins and Freddie Kings, and himself was a childhood friend of Jimmy and Stevie Ray Vaughan, co-wrote many of Stevie Ray Vaughan's biggest hits. Now, like his dad, Doyle started out playing drums originally at the tender age of 6 before switching to bass at 11 and then guitar at age 13, first taking the stage with Stevie Ray Vaughan himself at the age of 14 years old. And by 17, just 17, joined the fabulous Thunderbirds at Jimmy Ray Vaughan's band and started touring with them. Now, Doyle is known for his unique playing style in that while he's right-handed, he actually plays guitar left-handed and then strung upside down on top of that with the strings strung from high to low, which is the opposite of the way guitars are normally played. Now, he does that because he said when he first picked up the guitar, it just felt more natural for him to play that way. But as a result, it gives him kind of different chord voicings, and he tends to bend the strings down instead of up. And so it gives him a unique style that only a handful of other guitarists actually do this too. People like Albert King and Otis Rush, Bobby Womack and Eric Gales among them. But it gives Doyle a unique flavor all to himself. Now, Doyle first came to my attention when he was about 20 years old following the death of Stevie Ray Vaughan. He co-founded the band Archangels. And they put out a self-titled debut album in 1992, which I still love this album to this day. Basically, Archangels came about as a group he co-founded with other members of the Austin music scene following the death of Stevie Ray Vaughan back in 1990. He got together with fellow musicians Charlie Sexton, singer-songwriter and guitarist himself, and Stevie Ray Vaughan's rhythm section Double Trouble, which was Chris Whipper-Layton on drums and Tommy Shannon on bass. And initially, it was an organic way of the band's members to kind of help deal with their mutual loss of Stevie Ray. And it started out just as jamming and playing some gigs together, but quickly grew into something more serious with fans demanding more, and hence the self-titled 1990 time to release on Geffen TGC Records. Now, they stayed together for about another year before splitting up and moving on to other things, and it was kind of because of tensions in the group. One, you had two big people in the band, 21 years old at the same time, in Charlie Sexton and Doyle, and while musically they got along great, personality-wise they were kind of really different. Charlie was a bit more serious and ready to work. Doyle was a bit more about pushing Charlie's buttons. And just had kind of a different personal outlook on life as a younger guy, and also had a bit of a drug problem that kind of got in the way. Now, he eventually got himself cleaned up and set about working on his first debut solo album, self-titled Doyle Bramhall released in 1996. This album was produced by Wendy and Lisa, and as such, kind of features more R&B flavor to it. Of course, Wendy and Lisa were Prince's band The Revolution, Wendy Melvoin and Lisa Coleman. And this also led to Doyle meeting his ex-wife Susanna Melvoin, who would later be in his band Smokestack, which we'll get to later. But it's a great record, but didn't really set the world on fire or get a lot of notice other than critically, not criminally. And that would lead to Doyle's next record in 1999, which was the album Jelly Cream, which is more of a blues rock affair. It has some like more driving blues guitar, electric guitar, as well as acoustic guitars. Features great tracks like Snake Charmer, I'm the One, I Wanna Be and Marry You. The latter two, which were re-recorded and performed by Eric Clapton and B.B. King for their Riding with the King album in 2000. This is still one of my favorite things that Doyle has ever done. It's just such a great record. It's a shame it didn't really get more notice than it did, but it kept him going. This was put out on RCA Records. And his working with Eric and B.B. King led to a lasting relationship with both fathers, which has continued and maintained to this day, especially with Eric Clapton, who he has continued to tour with and record records with, as well as produce some of them over the last decade plus. Now, also around the same time, Doyle got a call from Roger Waters and became a touring member of his band on the In the Flesh tour, and also appears on the In the Flesh record. It was a tour result of that. Doing all of the David Gilmour parts of singing and playing guitar on that record. And then in 2001, Doyle released his next record, Welcome, with his new band Smokestack. And it was around this time that I first got to meet Doyle. At the time, he was opening for Eric Clapton and sometimes doing double duty, even sitting in with his band. And this is follows in the line of Jelly Cream, some great drive and blues rock, slow and upbeat blues rockers. Great record that again got a lot of critical acclaim, had a minor hit in Green Light Girl and songs like So You Want It to Rain, which still plays in his live sets. But again, didn't quite sell like huge numbers or anything. So Doyle, if you want to sing Derek, I don't know why. Derek and the Dominoes, Clapton, there you go, it's like. Took kind of a long sabbatical between releasing solo records to his new record, Rich Man, which is 15 years later on from Welcome. But it wasn't like he wasn't busy during this time. He sure kept himself going, working as either a guitarist, a songwriter, or a producer for a rather long list of people, including the likes of Derek Trucks and Susan Tedeschi of Tedeschi Trucks Band, T-Bone Burnett, Elton John, Gary Clark Jr., Greg Allman, Dr. John, Erykah Badu, and Sheryl Crow, among many, many, many others. And also working on material for what which would eventually become Rich Man. And we're going to get into the album proper review in its time, but first I got to take a little bit of a break because I have a lot of notes. And so in the meantime, enjoy a little bit of Doyle live on tour. So check this out. goddamn awesome, right? Now, Rich Man is truly a masterpiece, definitely Doyle's masterpiece. And even though it's only been out for a couple of weeks, it's quickly risen up to be, like I said, top contender for my album of the year. Now, there's a lot, much like its title says, there's a lot of riches to be found in sound and styles on this record. And unlike his past albums, which would feature, like I said, more smoke and blues rock and stuff, Rich Man is more laid back, mid-tempo affair, although that doesn't hamper the album one bit. And there's still moments of sweet ripping guitar in it, so don't worry about that. If you're a Doyle fan, you know that. But they're more reserved for when the songs need them. Probably, I think, a lesson he definitely picked up from all his time working with Eric Clapton, where Clapton himself learned that you don't have to go full on all the time. You can just save that stuff for when you really need it. And you also have to keep in mind, too, that this is an album made by a guy who's approaching 50 and not in his 20s or 30s, where those albums reflect that kind of sound. And just hitting 50 myself this year, I get that, and as such, I kind of appreciate that a bit more, and it very much reflects the musical journey that he's been on in that time. The album is also informed by sojourns that Doyle had taken to India and North Africa following the death of his father in 2011, and you can hear that not only in traces of musically of songs like My People and Saharan Crossing, which we'll get to later, but also lyrically in the spiritual nature of life's journey that guides the album's songs. This record is the sort that you just want to immerse yourself in, absorbing the depths of its soul while it takes you on an oral adventure. And you definitely feel like you've been someplace when you've listened to this record. You feel like you've gone on a journey, for sure, from start to finish. And as such, during that time, you've also, as the title track suggests, gained a wealth of experience from it. There's a very 70s vibe that flows through a lot of this record, and a lot of parts, I feel like he kind of achieves what Bowie was going for when he made the Young Americans album, which was very much his kind of love letter to that sound of 70s R&B and stuff like that. You certainly get an insight into all of the musical influences of the guy Doyle through his years. There's elements of rock, R&B, funk, blues, jazz, classical, as well as the aforementioned world music that's salt and peppered throughout this album and so much audio seasoning. And there's just, as I said before, man, there's just so damn much to love here, and truthfully, not a bad track on it. I could talk about this album for days and days and weeks, but I'm going to give you the Reader's Digest highlights version of the record. And here we go. The album kicks off with the R&B groove of Your Mama Can't Help You, featuring the legendary James Gadson on drums. You already heard that track a little earlier on. Really cool video that looks like it was dug up and filmed from the 70s, but it's actually brand new. It's cool. I'll probably be featuring that again. That's followed more 70s R&B style track with the song November, which serves as a love song to Doyle's late father. Features great horns and backing vocals, which you'll also hear peppered throughout the album. After that, we have the song The Veil, which is a great slow burn number with a cool lyrical twist in that the song's words of the chorus, evil and veil, share the same lettering, just switched around a little bit. And it also alternates back and forth from kind of laid back verses and more crunchy choruses, and again, sweet guitar work from Doyle. My People, which opens with the sound of an Indian sarangi, probably mispronounced that word, but forgive me for that, has a great message lyrically in that underneath it all, despite our outward appearances and our outward beliefs, we're basically all the same people underneath. And features some great baritone guitar work, and has an interesting journey musically, kind of evolving off a riff reminiscent of Traffic's Dear Mr. Fantasy, and then towards the end of the song becomes almost late period Beatlesque, especially when it gets to the guitar solo and the harmonium. That's followed by the gentle acoustic driven number New Faith, which features harmony duet vocals from Norah Jones, really lovely love song. After that, we have Keep You Dreamin', which again mines that 70s R&B funk vibe with a bit of a darker flair in the verse lines and more uplifting backing in the chorus parts. Nice clavinet work on that tune from Adam Minkoff, who is one of the album's co-producers and plays a variety of instruments on this album. He's definitely the secret rep on this record and in Doyle's Tory brand too. Definitely so. He played, when we saw him live, he played guitar, he played various keyboard parts and drums as well. Pretty cool stuff. That's followed by Hands Up, which features some nice Hendrix-inspired kind of guitar work and the staccato machine gun riff burst that kind of bear in mind the song's title track, which was influenced in part by the racial unrest in Ferguson, Missouri, and ends on a positive message though, which was great. It was really good in the live set. Rich Man, which is the album's title track, deals with finding spiritual balance and duality in the word lowly, whereas even though you might be down and at the same time you're closer to the ground and thereby closer to the earth, and also your own personal truth. Features some great guest performances from members of the Dap Kings and Sherrod Jones Band, and who Doyle's also worked with, and a fine string section, again courtesy of Adam Minkoff, that crosses into the album's next track and one of the highlights of the record for me, and that is the song Harmony, which floats in like a gentle autumn breeze, and it's just a gorgeous love song ballad. And as a whole, this album has a very fall-like feeling to it. We've talked before on the show about how certain albums have certain seasonal feelings to them, and this one's very fall feeling to it, and so it's perfect that it was released at this time of the year. Actually, looking back, it seems like a lot of Doyle's albums come out in September, so must be something about that for him. From that, the next song on the album takes a kind of a musical dark turn in the song Cry of Ages, another highlight of the live set. We might get a little piece of that later on. And that emits kind of a creepy, almost Halloween vibe, especially in the opening parts and the verse lines, but gets into more rocking in the choruses and erupts into a full-out ripping guitar solo, one of Doyle's finest on the album, that closes out the song. Next up, we take an Arabic-tinged trek through the interlude Sahara Crossing, which features a mixing of musical stylings from that region, and it segues into the album's epic moment, which is more or less the closing cut, even though it's not the closing cut. But it's the Samanas, or the Seekers, which is a nearly 10-minute tune and a musical odyssey all in itself. It starts off with a gentle first passage with bursts of guitar, explosion, building and building, and then taking a sharp turn into its second act, turning again into another almost Beatlesque style rocker, before fading into the sound of silence for just a second, and then gently from that you get this guitar feedback which almost sounds like fighter airplanes going by, old school airplane fighters, before shifting into its final third act of guitar freakout. It's just so friggin' great. And then the album closes out properly on a cover of Jimi Hendrix's Hear My Train A-Comin', most likely inspired for Doyle's time as part of the Experience Hendrix tours that go around, featuring a lot of great guitar players. But that's the small Reader's Digest version of this album in a nutshell. Doyle Bramhall II's Rich Man, like I said, great, such a good album, a true masterpiece, and as I pointed out, probably going to be my album of the year. Just that damn good. Go out and pick it up. Go out and see Doyle. He's out on tour right now. Such a great show. So glad I got to catch him here in town. I didn't have to travel to go see him, although I would have. It's just a great set. We had no opener, didn't need one. He just came out and played. Pretty much mostly all tracks from the new album too. It's so good. Here's a little bit more Doyle to close out the show. It's going to be a long one, pardon me for that, but go out and get the album. Go out and see him live. Doyle Bramhall II is the real deal, folks, and well deserving of your time and attention. That's the show for this week. Tune in next week. Thanks for sticking through this extra long episode, and we will see you next time on Sit and Spin. Take it easy.